All right, we are live. Welcome to Liberal Discourses, the space on X, where we take the opportunity to explore topics that may not be getting enough attention. My name is Vanessa, and I will be your host for the evening as we explore the Alberta Next panel and their proposals as they undertake a province wide consultation to chart their path, secure their economy, and assert their sovereignty within a united Canada. This is the fourth episode of a 6-week series that will cover each of the ideas that has been proposed by the Alberta Next panel. Tonight, we are talking about federal transfers and equalization. I'm joined this evening by my three panelists, Val, Steve, and Josh. Each of them has a different take on the issue of Alberta sovereignty and independence, so as always, this should be an interesting conversation. And I'd like to ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves and where they stand on the issue of Alberta. We'll start with Val, then we'll go to Steve, and then Josh.
Hello, everybody. I know everybody in the space, but for anyone else who's listening, I am Val. I have a history in the finance industry for quite a long period of time. My stance for Alberta is that it should seek independence, as other avenues of trying to affect change within Canada for Albertans and Canadians seem to continuously hit a dead brick wall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Val. Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steve. I'm just a regular guy. Puts out a podcast every now and then, whenever I get around to it. And my stance on Alberta independence is that I think Alberta should leave Canada and work towards becoming a 51st state, which would take decades, and just reclaiming what was took from them through Confederation and imposed upon them, and kind of undoing the Marxist and socialist policies that have shaped Alberta since the 1960s, predominantly.
All right, thank you, Steve. And you might want to check your microphone. You were starting to drop out a little bit there. Josh, go ahead.
Thank you, Vanessa. Hi, my name is Joshua Canada. I live here in Ontario, and my position on this issue is to be as open-minded as possible toward the policies and directives that Albertans are deliberating at the present moment. So I hope that my sort of impartial perspective on some of these policies helps to further the discussion and the thinking on the matter at hand.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh. And thank you to all my panelists who are joining me on this voyage as we go through 6 weeks of topics. So the discussion is set to run for 1 hour, but if we need more time to thoroughly explore the topic, I'll simply turn off the clock and let it come to its natural conclusion. After that, we'll open it up to the floor for a question and answer session to hear questions, comments, or perspectives that our listeners might have on the Alberta Next project and the proposal for their ideas as far as Alberta federal transfers and equalization goes. Because the Alberta government isn't here to represent themselves, and with the aim of attempting to be very fair to them, I'm going to play the Alberta Next video on federal transfers and equalization. That way, everybody will have a few minutes to listen, settle in, and prepare to discuss this large and important topic.
The Alberta Next panel is touring Alberta to hear from Albertans on how our province can better protect ourselves from Ottawa's economic attacks, while building a more prosperous, strong, and sovereign Alberta within Canada. A provincial referendum on some of these ideas is coming in 2026. But what's on that referendum ballot and what happens next for Alberta is up to you. One idea being discussed by the panel is reforming federal equalization and transfers. Since 2005, Alberta taxpayers have contributed, on average, $23 billion more per year to the federal government in federal taxes than they received back in projects, benefits, and other spending from Ottawa. That's a net loss to Albertans of nearly $500 billion in just 20 years. Most of those redistributed Alberta tax dollars are spent by Ottawa and Quebec and other liberal-leaning provinces across the country. And part of that massive fiscal transfer out of Alberta comes through the Federal Equalization Program, which has seen Alberta pay over $67 billion into the program since 1957, while receiving back not a single penny since 1965. In 2021, Albertans voted in a referendum to remove equalization from the Constitution, but Ottawa completely ignored us. So what next? Alberta can't stop these federal transfers on its own. The Alberta government doesn't write a check to Ottawa each year, and we can't ask Albertans to stop paying their federal taxes. The fact is, fixing this problem will require political support from other provinces. One option that would be appealing to most other provinces is to have the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes. This is how it could work. Currently, Ottawa collects over 60% of all the federal and provincial taxes that Canadians pay. The Ottawa bureaucracy takes its portion, with the remainder inefficiently and unequally distributed to the provinces. The dollars we do get back have a lot of strings attached, forcing us to run our provincial programs and build infrastructure the way Ottawa wants us to. No provinces want that, especially the big ones like Quebec, Ontario, BC, and Alberta. What if we cut out the middleman and instead had provincial governments that are responsible for delivering health, education, and social services collect around 60% of all taxes, with Ottawa receiving the rest? Ottawa, in turn, would be able to end most transfer programs to the provinces, along with all the strings, bureaucracy, and waste attached to them. Quebec has already proposed having the federal government let provinces keep GST revenue generated in their provinces in return for ending the federal health transfer. Seems like a great idea. Why not apply that same logic to all federal transfers? Less money collected and wasted in Ottawa. Less federal transfers with only a modest amount of equalization for the smallest provinces and territories that actually need it. And more funds for provincial health, education, and other programs, without strings attached by Ottawa's politicians and bureaucrats. That seems like something most provinces could rally behind. So what say you, Alberta? Should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to reform federal transfers and equalization by having the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes, with Ottawa collecting less? And are there any other strategies Alberta should be looking at to alleviate the massive federal fiscal drain to Alberta? For more information, visit alberta.ca/next.
All right. So there we go. That's what the province has put out as far as federal transfers and equalization. So I want to get the opinion from the panel here. How do you feel about how this ad is portrayed? What information do you think is really speaking to you and standing out? And we'll start with Val, perhaps.
I like that it puts forth the idea that a province could collect its own revenues and taxes first and then kind of remit what's left over. But it doesn't really go into a whole lot of details about how that would work or how the equalization payment formula might be changed. That would benefit not only Alberta, but other provinces. So there's not too many details, but maybe that's the point. Maybe they're open to the ideas, right?
Well, that certainly seems to be the case. They have now started holding their various panels throughout the province. There were two this past week, one in Red Deer and one in Edmonton. So they are certainly now receiving feedback from the people about not just the proposals, but how the ads are put across as well. Steve, I'd like to get your opinion on the ad.
Hi, yeah. I just don't know how they're going to go about convincing other provinces to help stop the bleeding from Alberta here, because I just don't see what their incentive would be, since they're getting everything for free and Alberta really can't do anything to mitigate that on their own, or to, I don't know, vengeance isn't the right word, but I mean, it can't really do Alberta can't do anything. So yeah, I don't know what the solution is here, really, besides I don't know, being being diplomatic as you can be, and hoping that sooner or later, a premier who won't be the smartest person gets elected in those other provinces, and you can be opportunistic to try to get change through that particular premier.
Well, I do believe the idea, what they're mentioning here, is an effort to get the other provinces on side. Val, I see you've got your hand up. Give me 1 second here because I do want to get Josh's impression of the ad before we get going. Josh, what do you think?
Thank you, Vanessa. I thought the video was fairly well. It was constructed very well. It put some important data there for Albertans to consider, namely that Alberta has paid $67 billion in equalization payments since 1957. They outlined the referendum in 2021, where Albertans voted to remove equalization from the Constitution. And then it also provided a
Okay, have we
solution.
lost Josh? Or is it my end? Val, can you hear me?
It's your end, Vanessa. We can hear Josh.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And they also provided a solution regarding the percentages. Why doesn't a province collect 60% of the taxes? And then it also opens it up to the public for their recommendations as well. So by and large, I thought it was a video that was very well done, and it puts the issue right in front of everybody's face to consider.
True enough. Val, go ahead. I saw you had your hand up.
Steve had an excellent point. How do you get the provinces that are perfectly fine with how the federal transfers and equalization are occurring, and they haven't had any hardship from it? How do you get them on board in realizing, hey, this can be a benefit for you? So Alberta would have its, excuse me, its work cut out for it, right?
I suppose one thing we're used to hearing out west, of course, from our own premiers and the dissatisfaction that they have with the federal transfer payments and equalization. But the one thing we don't hear from is how there is dissatisfaction, perhaps in Newfoundland or say Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. It seems like there's a very clear delineation between what communication goes to whom and where. We don't get to hear from the East Coast, so it's hard to say. But what do you think is possible, that there perhaps might be more provinces interested, and which ones do you think might? How do you think that might be distributed?
I think it's all determined by the framework of how it's set up. And if you can put forward a platform that shows, yeah, if you collect your taxes within your province, here's the benefit, here's the programs you can fund, before then sending the rest to Ottawa and just skipping the middleman, right? In my opinion, there's no reason for us to have it all there and then have it all sent back. That sounds like more bureaucracy, and it sounds like less control over how you manage your program. So if you constructed a platform or a report or an outline that other provinces could follow and see, oh, well, here's the benefits. We can now tweak this to fit our economy and our jurisdiction. Then you'd have a better time of moving things forward. And that's just in terms of the federal transfers. For the equalization, it would be, a little different. Same concept though. If we change the formula, for example, right? Most Albertans don't have an issue. We know we're a have province. We don't have an issue with sending some money to other provinces that need that boost, but it's currently not working anymore. It hasn't been updated in a long time. It's not working for where our current economy sits, and there are other provinces that are taking advantage of continuously receiving equalization. So adjusting it as opposed to removing it might be better off in the interest of all Canadians. Of course, Alberta would like to remove it altogether, because then we would have more money within the province, but that won't sit well with other provinces, and I doubt you'll ever get any other province on board with that.
True enough. I'm dying to hear perspective, because of course, Ontario, now they of course are the largest province in Canada, and I'm going to imagine they also probably rep there, if not the most, to the and the equalization. What is your impression on that?
You're roboting just a little bit, Vanessa. It's a little hard to make out what you're saying.
Sorry about that. I don't adjust myself. Can you hear me now?
That sounds a bit better, yeah.
Slightly patchy wireless. Josh, did you manage to hear my question?
No, but just figure out your connection and we'll make do. I do think something that before we enter these questions of whether other provinces would want to get on board with the full restructuring of equalization, I think we need to better understand where equalization and federal transfers comes from. And it more or less comes from the Great Depression. So after the Great Depression, we had this report called the Rowell-Sirois report. And within this report, they had recommended that equalization payments of this nature should be implemented in Canada because post World War II, our social safety net was expanding. So the desire for Canadians at the time was to have consistency across the country when it comes to public services. So, of course, the Rowell-Sirois report was published in 1940, and it was in 1957 where equalization payments were more or less enacted, and then all the way to 1982 with the Canada Act, Section 36, subsection 2, where we have equalization enshrined in the Constitution. So by way of theorem, there is a rational and economic argument that supports equalization. And I just think it's important for Albertans and maybe everybody to understand from the point of view of the Federation, we wanted to create consistency across the country so as to give people an opportunity to move where they want based on labor needs, not needs based on public care and things of this nature. So we tried to establish a baseline, and I think to that effect, the program, equalization program, has been extremely successful.
I noticed you're somewhat selective over that. Well done for pointing out the study that was done back in 1940, which of course was put on hold in 1941 because of concerns with the Second World War. That took priority. But equalization only refers to trying to assist with public services, making sure there's consistency across the board. That doesn't get down to the real issue of federal transfer payments. So I'd like to get your opinion on that, Josh.
On federal transfer payments, which ones in particular?
Well, I do believe right now we're just going to keep it generalized. The money that from revenues transferred out of provinces to the federal government, which eventually do get sent back to us in order to fund our provincial programs.
Okay, well, if we should be specific here, Vanessa. There's equalization is a part of a broad system of sort of federal provincial exchanges. So you have the Canada Health Transfer, the CHT, and in 24 or 25, $61 billion was allocated across the country from the federal government, and the distribution was based on population size. And there's a formula that includes cash and I think tax point transfers. So when it comes to the CHT, I believe it was Ontario that received the most, 23.8 billion, I believe. and Alberta received 6.6 billion. So we have the CHT, and then we also have the Canada Social Transfer. So that's the CST, and that supports post-secondary education, social assistance, social services, early childhood development, and this applies to all provinces and territories. So this 24-25, they gave out 17 billion for CST, and I think Alberta got 1.9 billion, and Ontario had like six point something billion. And then we have one other transfer, which is the territorial formula financing. So money is given to the territories. It's because of the maintenance and the upkeep of the territories. So it's a small sum, I guess. It's like 5.4 billion. So we have a variety of federal initiatives here: the Canada Health Transfer, the Canada Social Transfer, the territorial formula financing, and of course the Equalization that redistributes wealth across the country so as to create some consistency and a baseline of standard within the country. And as I mentioned before, it's been very successful in redistributing wealth across the country.
Well, there's no question it's been successful at moving money around. Steve, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hello, yeah, funny comment there, by the way, Vanessa. Well, I wanted to fact check also a claim about what is on the Alberta Next panel website, and I don't think it's true, where it says Quebec has already proposed having the federal government let provinces keep GST revenue generated in their provinces in return for ending the federal health transfer. I don't think that is true at all. I mean, I could see them wanting to keep the GST and make it more of just to basically make it a PST for sure. But why would Quebec ever say, "Oh yeah, just keep your $13 billion a year, Alberta. We'll just keep the GST funding"? So I don't think that's completely honest on their part.
Well, that was one of the questions that kept coming up. I have noticed, I've watched the panel discussions for Red Deer and Edmonton, and there was some question over some of the accuracy in the ads. So I think that's something that they are taking on board. Val, go ahead.
I just wanted to address Josh explaining the federal transfers and equalization. They're actually separate. So when you're talking about the Canada Health Transfer and you're talking about the Canada Social Transfer, those are the federal transfers. That is separate from equalization payments. They have their own formulas and they're based on their own set of criteria. They're actually separate. So when you're talking about that, you have to be really careful not to mix those up, right? So the federal transfers, that would be revenues and taxes from Alberta and federal taxes the federal government gets and then remits to the provinces. The federal transfers in the Canada Health Transfer and Social Transfer here in Alberta. And it comes with some stipulations on how that money is used and how it's used in the industries that it's pertaining to. The equalization is a little bit separate, but it is a payment that goes to quote unquote the have-not provinces or whatever provinces are deemed at that time based on their formula. So it's a little different. The other thing to note in federal transfers, specifically for Alberta, is that Canada Health Transfer and the Canada Social Transfer, yes, they're federal transfers. Alberta also receives subsidies for oil and gas companies and things like the Trans Mountain Pipeline. There's some subsidies and payments that go there, but that's not something that's given to the province of Alberta to deal with. So some people like to include that in their calculations of the money of what federal transfers happen to Alberta, but you actually have to exclude them because they are separate from Alberta and Alberta doesn't get them and then remit them to these companies. They're directly in the contracts with these companies themselves.
Yeah, I don't.
Josh, do you have a comment?
Oh.
We'll get to you in a
Go
second.
ahead, Steve.
Oh, I just don't think it matters what it's called, whether it's a transfer or whatever the category is under when the money moves around. It's meant to just to take money from the people who have it and give it to the people who don't in disguise, and it's all discombobulated. It's all a big mess. But you're paying for social services for people across the country in one way or another. So or welfare, and so I don't really. So just in defense of Josh, there he might not have his categories right, but I just don't think it matters.
Well, that is kind of the interesting point about federal transfers. When they were originally set up at the beginning of Confederation, the federal government was responsible for the big things. So you're talking about, putting in infrastructure like railroads, developing a postal system, national defense, and all of that. And at the time, because we were more of a mercantile export import based economy, they knew that the largest share of revenue they could get that would help fund Confederation would be customs duties, excise, that kind of thing. And they had thought at the time that the provinces with lesser revenue streams and lesser concerns, municipal, healthcare, social, education, that kind of thing, would not be as revenue intensive. And that turned out not to be the case. So that's kind of some interesting backstory on that. And of course, I've gone through and done some more research on that. I've got an article and I'll post it into the nest. But I do want to get kind of an idea from you guys, because Quebec, interestingly enough, we're going to be touching more on this next week as we get into taxes. But Quebec has a two-pronged deal going on here. They are a province of over, not quite 10 million, but getting close, people. And they're receiving equalization. Last year, I believe it was to the tune of $14.8 billion. But they also collect taxes. So I want to get kind of an impression from you guys as to how you think that that might be working out for Canada, Canadians, the system, and so on. What are your thoughts on all of that? We'll start with Val.
It's incredibly frustrating because the government of Quebec have directly come out and said that, yeah, we have our our natural resources that we could develop and industries that we could develop, like natural gas and so on and so forth. But they don't. And they don't do it because if they did do it, well, then they would be generating more income, more revenue, and then they would miss out on the free equalization payments. So instead of using their money to develop these industries in order to generate their own revenue, they're using that money to do other things in their province. And that's good for Quebec, right? That helps improve all their other programs and whatnot. But it's at the expense of another province. So it's incredibly frustrating. Like I like to look at it this way. What if Alberta turned around and did that? And we said, you know what? We don't believe that we're going to be pulling the oil from the ground anymore. We don't believe it anymore. And we just shut it all off, right? And then we say, okay, well, we're going to receive equalization now because we're a have-not province. We've decided to keep it in the ground, but we need this money because we want to run all of our other industries and agriculture and all our other stuff and our social services, right? So as an Albertan, it's incredibly frustrating to look at a province take advantage of a have province at the have province's expense.
Josh, what are your thoughts?
Well, the formula is fairly simple, Vanessa, when it comes to equalization. It's based on the fiscal capacity of a province. So if your province's ability to generate revenues is below the national standard, then you are given equalization payments to ensure that you meet that standard. So essentially, that's cut and dry. So if if Quebec is receiving equalization payments, they do so because they meet the criteria set in the formula.
But they're only meeting the criteria because they're not developing the resources and the industries that they could.
Do you have a rebuttal, Josh?
I mean, that may be the case. Ultimately, it's inconsequential to the overall payout. I suppose it was 13 billion. So, I mean, it is what it is.
I think we're talking about human nature now, though. It just, if you're sitting in your mom's house or your parents' house as an adult, you're safe because you don't have to worry about making rent or anything. Well, you're gonna take longer to get off your ass to go do something. So I think Josh's point there about the numbers, it doesn't really make. I get what he's saying, but the problem is that these programs, they promote mediocrity of living and just, hey, we're surviving. If we just take this from those people, well, I mean, your life's going to suck. You won't have any money to actually go and have fun with or do anything, but you'll be able to have you have your what we think is free health care. You'll have money to go to the food bank or you don't go to the food bank, but they get money off of welfare, and that's the problem. They just want to get by, and that's totally what socialism does to people. It doesn't make them want to flourish as human beings, and they actually look down on people who do flourish as individuals. I think they must have ripped somebody off to get rich.
Well, you might have a point about human nature that we generally try to assume that people generally are good, but there's also the matter of opportunity as well, and this might very well be a case of don't hate the player, hate the game. It is not. It is something that has not been addressed yet, but how soon it would be in the future, I don't know. That would be the question. So I'm just putting a couple of things up in the nest here. Oh, go ahead, Val.
I have a hard time trying to think of any other situation in which money can be taken directly out of your pocket, you don't get a say about it, you can't make it stop, and then you have no ability to control what happens or where that money gets spent after. I can't think of a single other program or circumstance where that is not called theft.
100%.
Well, I do believe that in some ways, the fact that it's government and therefore removed, it's not necessarily a personal one-on-one, that makes it official, sanctioned, perhaps legislated, has some sort of approval, maybe perhaps. It is something that is regulated by the government, and because the Quebec hydro facility there is categorized as a natural resource. It's a renewable one as opposed to Alberta's, which are non-renewable. It gets it's because it's classified as that it can get away with partially being discounted at 50%. Only 50% of what it generates as far as revenue goes counts towards the calculations for equalization. But the other thing, of course, too, is that it is a crown corporation, which is run by or governed by legislation that is dictated by the province of Quebec. So if Quebec is uh, not terribly bothered about having their energy regulator set the price per kilowatt hours very low in order to satisfy um, their constituents and their customers, I don't know if there's much we can really do about that. I don't know. What do you think?
All I know is that Albertans have been upset about equalization, not necessarily that it's happening, but what happens after the federal government has the money and wants to use the formula to give it to provinces. And I know Albertans have been really mad about it. They voted on it in a referendum that passed, and not by a small bit. It wasn't like 51%, right? And that the government of Canada turned around and did nothing with it. They didn't review it. They didn't look at the referendum. It was a constitutionally binding referendum in Alberta, so we were obligated to try and pursue change, and nothing happened. So all I know is that in order to change equalization, I mean, how do you even do that? What else can the province of Alberta even do to get that fixed? I know that doesn't quite address what you were talking about, but I'm on a rant there.
I see that, and perhaps the person we really need to hear from is out in Ontario, because Ontario is the biggest province and probably does pay and has paid the most into federal transfers and equalization since they began, and especially since equalization began in 1957. And I think only once has Ontario qualified to receive it. What do you think, Josh?
It's just speaking for myself. Very rarely does equalization ever come up in the public discourse in Ontario. I think by and large, Ontarians acknowledge that we are a wealthy province. The St. Lawrence is just a beautiful gift. Our lumber, our minerals, our great soil. Uh, it allows us to have an opportunity economically that places like Manitoba or the Maritimes simply do not have. So I think the reason why we don't talk about equalization that much is because we're happy to help. We're happy to help the Maritimes. We're happy to help Manitoba. We're happy to help any way we can. That's sort of what it means to be a part of a country. So it's not a conversation because it's necessary. And we have an abundance of wealth here, and we're happy to share it with our fellow Canadians.
Val, Steve?
I'm not happy to share it. And I don't think anybody else should tell me. I'm not saying Josh said this about me, but no one has the right to tell me I should be happy about sharing it. But also, that's a bigger problem here with the discussion. No, not with the way you're running it or anything, Val, but the way Alberta Next Panel puts everything, same with like the pension plan, is they're more focused on where it's going, where me as an individual, I care more about where it's coming off, and it's coming off my paychecks. And that's what, because I don't care where it goes. I want to stop it from coming off the top of my paycheck every couple of weeks or a month, how much whenever somebody gets paid. And I think that's the biggest problem is like Canada doesn't look at the individual. They look at everything as a collective, a group of people who live here, a group of people who live there. We're all in this together, happy to help. And we're not all in this together. And I'm not happy to help because I have no clue what that person who's getting my money is choosing to do with their life. Just like just take a child tax credit. Nobody asked me for permission if you should start a family. Like why are you taking money off of me and saving money for or getting money back from the government because you had kids? Nobody consulted me. What school are you going to put your kids in? Nobody asked me. So why do you get to take my money because you decide to unilaterally make choices? And that's the problem with this idea that we're all happy to help. Because if I'm happy to help, then I got a say in what the hell you're going to do with your life.
Go ahead, Val.
I do agree with Steve on a lot of that. I think socialism, if it's implemented too heavily, definitely breeds mediocrity, doesn't let people rise up. We are a first world nation, right? It's not like we have to rely on socialism 100% of the time in order for every person to survive eating bread every day. It's, which would make sense in terms of equalizing money or profits in that scenario. It's not a country that has to rely on something like that. I think that for equalization payments specifically, there wouldn't be so much of an issue with it if provinces that give had some reassurances or understanding of how that equalization payment is going to be used in the provinces that receive it, and that a plan is set out in those provinces so that, yeah, if they have to rely on equalization payments so that their social services or their whatever services that they need to have leveled out, a plan is in place so that by 10 or 15 or 20 years they can support themselves. Like, I think equalization should have had that in there where, yeah, we're trying to equalize how much, services are across Canada, but let's use the money in those provinces to boost those economies or to boost their economies so that they have their own money to pay for those social services. And the fact that provinces don't have any say in that, and the provinces that receive it just do whatever with it, is a huge problem.
Well, part of the reason behind equalization, of course, as Josh had mentioned earlier, is that there was supposed to be an ability to assist with the have not provinces in the delivery of the services. So, I mean, to that end, mind you, they did make it unconditional. See, when it comes to federal transfer payments, you're correct, Val. Federal transfer payments are conditional. They are directed, they have to be utilized in a certain ways, like be that for healthcare, education, or whatever. But when it comes to equalization, yes, they are unconditional. And is there perhaps an advantage, at least for the provinces who are the recipient of these equalization payments, to that unrestricted does give them the ability to make up a shortfall that they were perhaps not anticipating? Do you suppose that might be a predominant concern for them as the recipients of this equalization payment?
Well, absolutely. If it's used to boost up a deficit that they have, sure. But maybe equalization or a certain portion of that equalization should go to investing. I look at it like an investment. When Alberta gives equalization payments to and it goes to other provinces, it should be investing in their province so that the province grows. If the province isn't growing from that money, then why are we sending it? If they're just going to sit there and rely on it, they should use at least a portion of that to slowly build themselves up over time so they can stand on their own 2 feet.
Well, that's because Marxism is a no growth mindset, right? They don't ever believe in growing. They just continue believing in, let's just redistribute equally whatever is currently like invented or created. They don't really have a growth mindset. That's the problem. To answer your question too a little more, yeah, they should just be used to help with the infrastructure of the roads that everybody uses. Because, for example, we buy products from Ontario and Quebec, and so we rely on their roads. I think what's his name, Frederick Hayek, in The Road to Serfdom made this argument as why the road should be free to use and paid through our taxes. So, and that's what it should be used for, whatever boosts their economy in terms of infrastructure, and not these social services. But again, it's all because people in Canada predominantly don't really believe in growth as much as they believe in just redistributing it, wealth, that is.
Well, it just seems it just when we're talking about Alberta, we're talking about 5 million people, right? And if we consider the population of Canada as being what are we at, like 42 million now? 42 million, 28 million of Canadians are actually receiving equalization payments. 66.7% of Canada's population lives in a province that receives equalization payments. And when it comes to the issues that are plaguing the Maritimes, issues of which Alberta and Ontario are very fortunate enough not to have, we start to peel back the layers of quite possibly a crisis that could be unfolding in the Atlantic parts of this country. So if you were to look at the revenues for the maritime provinces, what percent of the provincial revenue actually comes from the federal government in the form of a federal transfer? If you look at the maritime provinces in 23-24, PEI, 38.7% of PEI's total provincial revenue was federal transfers. New Brunswick, 36.7%. Nova Scotia, 33.4%. And then Manitoba at 32.9%. When we start looking at other provinces like Alberta, Alberta's at 16.5% and Quebec's at 21%. We start to get a more comprehensive view of how important federal transfers are to the Maritimes. And it's curious to me that the Maritimes and their dependency on federal transfers is never brought up by Albertans when speaking about this issue.
Well,
that would be because, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, sorry. Well, the counter to that is because, well, you have to understand that they don't have a right to live there. That's a problem. Like, so what you brought up is as if they have a right to exist out there. Well, no, if there's no work out there, then you go where the work is, or you create the wealth yourself by being an entrepreneur somehow. But that's the current setup though. Like, it's no growth, and it's like it's such a beta mindset, So like, I had a friend at one time. He was in New Brunswick, and he said he had the right to his lifestyle out there at our expense out west. Well, that was the last time I talked to him. He was a completely useless person. And like, that's the problem. They think they have a right to a lifestyle, which, like, I don't know what PEI do, but I know there's fishermen out there somewhere where it's like half the year they work and the other half they sit on EI, and that's all just a bunch of BS. If you can no longer support yourself, then go do something else or be homeless.
But you're misunderstanding the theory of federalism that we have. It's the horizontal fiscal equity distribution model. That's the whole point of these equalization payments. We want a base level of care, of social services across the country. So when people want to move from one province to another, they do so not because they'll have access to a better standard of healthcare or roads or something of this nature, whatever the case may be, but they do so because the labor market demands that of them: higher wages, more opportunity. So our policy here in Canada has to do with migration and distributing wealth across the country so that migration can happen equitably across the nation.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well,
sorry,
Steve
Vanessa.
Steve brings up a very interesting point, right? And I hate to do this, but at one point in our recent history, Donald Trump brought up an excellent point. And he said, well, if Canada can't stand on its own 2 feet, then maybe it shouldn't be a country. And that, I'm not quoting verbatim, but it's a similar thought process. If a province can't stand on its 2 feet, why is it having so many individuals living there that have to rely on these equalization payments in order to survive? Perhaps they should move to where the opportunities are. And I think that's the point Steve was making, right? I would be interested in knowing, Josh, you said, oh, Albertans don't really talk about the Maritimes. Well, that's because Albertans don't mind, just like you in Ontario don't mind helping other provinces, have a leg up or whatever, provinces that really need it. And I think a lot of the Maritime provinces, PEI, New Brunswick, so on and so forth, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Labrador, they kind of need that boost because their economies or their resources are perhaps not as high as some of the have provinces. And there's no issue with that, right? But I would be interested in knowing if somewhere in like PEI, right? If you drilled down into their ledger book of their government and you saw exactly what they're spending on, if they didn't have equalization, could they cut back on some of the expenses they have and still have okay or decent services without the equalization payments? There's probably cost saving measures that they could impose, but they don't because they know they're going to get a certain level of equalization. And that's that stagnation or mediocrity that Steve was talking about. Alberta likes to talk about Quebec most because Quebec it clearly has the ability to drive its economy forward in certain industries to never have to receive equalization. And it's an issue in Alberta because Quebec is taking equalization payments that could go to those other provinces that really do need it.
I think
Okay, just quickly here, you can't have your cake and eat it too. There was a referendum in 2021, and overwhelmingly, over 60% of Albertans said they were done with the federal equalization program. The federal government ignored them. So I'm not sure, Val, where you're getting this idea that Albertans care about the Maritimes because it was clearly outlined in 2021 that they didn't care.
All right, I'll make it very, very clear. In that referendum, the referendum wasn't, hey, let's end equalization. It was to take equalization out of the Constitution so that the formula could be amended and the program could be looked at and modified as needed or removed altogether. It wasn't a, hey, do you think equalization should stop altogether? It was a question about taking it out of the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, tomato, tomato. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I just think we need to differentiate here because we're not talking about the same people. So you both you and Val said you don't mind helping people, or you think people in your province don't mind. Okay, so that's a nice position. But when you contrast that with one of the kind of person who I just described, who thinks they have the right to live right to their lifestyle off of somebody else, I just described a scumbag, right? So now we're favoring people who are scumbags. Like, they're not nice people. They think they're owed something, and the nice people are getting hurt for it. And that's the problem with all these socialist programs, is that's just what it perpetuates. And so I think we need to stop being nice to the scumbag people, and the scumbag people can start just making their own way in the world. And if they got to uproot themselves because their province doesn't have any wealth to go after, there's no job opportunities, well, then so be it. Just, this is the real world. It's survive or die.
Well, again, from my point of view here in Ontario, we do have an appreciation for the unfair treatment that has been administered to the people of the Maritimes over an extended period of time. And most of this inequity that we see here has to do with just that, the unfair treatment of the Maritimes by various parties, both corporate, international, provincial. They have been the whipping boy for a long, long time. And I don't think it's fair for you and Val, Steve, to paint the Maritimes as being some kind of lackey or grifter when they are Canadians just like us. And we have a duty, according to our Constitution, Section 36, subsection 2, to provide them a base level of public service.
I have a question for you, Josh, since you've rattled off some statistics here. What was the percentages again of the provinces and their revenues in the way of federal transfers? Do you have that to hand right now?
Yeah, I could pull it up. Revenues by way of transfers. Yeah, PEI 38.7%, New Brunswick 36.7%, Nova Scotia 33.4%. And this actually comes from a report by Fraser Institute in 2025, Atlantic Canada's Precarious Public Finances.
Okay, the reason I ask, now that is federal transfers, that's not equalization, is that correct?
Yeah, share of provincial revenue in each province that comes from federal government in the form of federal transfers. Federal transfers, correct.
Okay, excellent. Because when I was doing my search through various documentation, of course, going back through the history of federal transfers and equalization for Canada, in 1874, the provincial balance sheets demonstrated that at the time, the provinces and what they were drawing for revenue from the federal government through Dominion transfers, as they were called at the time, were broken down like this. New Brunswick, 92% of its revenue came from the Dominion subsidy. Nova Scotia was at 81%. Prince Edward Island was at 75%. Manitoba at the time was 88%. It was also a brand new province. And British Columbia was at 62. And this is back in 1874. So, what is encouraging in all of this at the time, of course, these provinces were still trying to establish, they hadn't established direct taxation yet, they hadn't established uh, public domain fees, these kind of things. It was still very new to Confederation, so the reliance on federal transfers at that point in time was, of course, quite heavy as we got Confederation established. But what it is encouraging now, of course, is to see that the numbers are floating much lower. That means the provinces are well established. So the next question, I suppose, would have to be, in light of that, does this demonstrate that the provinces are sufficiently together and established now?
You're rubber banding, but I heard you're rubber banding here, Vanessa, but I can answer this question. No,
Okay.
no. A comparison of the 20th century to the 21st centuries, there's just so much unaccounted for in these comparisons. But I think we can just rest on this. If we look at net debt to GDP ratio in all the provinces from 2023 to 2024, which is the most recent year of completed data, net debt to GDP. So this ratio measures the size of each province's net debt in relation to the economy. Newfoundland and Labrador has the highest debt to GDP ratio in Canada at 45.3%. Alberta is at 9%. So all the projections here as it relates to the Atlantic provinces, they're all projected to continue to increase their debt to GDP. And this is a big problem, and it's not reflected in the Alberta Next panel when they're having a conversation about federal transfers and equalization. And I do want to give a quick shout out to the woman who was in Red Deer during the Alberta Next panel. When this subject came up, she actually stood up to Daniel Smith and said, listen, we are all Canadians first. And our province is blessed because we have all this oil. We have an abundance of this, that, and the other. And we need to do what we need to do in order to help out the people in the Atlantic. And she said that right to Daniel Smith's face. And it was very brave of her to do so. And it was definitely poignant as well, because it was just skirted under the rug for some reason. But I'll land it there, Vanessa.
Well, it's unfortunate that I was rubber banding, but the point that I was attempting to get to before you jumped in to rescue me was that if the provinces are now established, how necessary is it for provinces to transfer money to the federal government in order to receive it back for the services they would have to fund anyway? So, and I'm not talking about equalization at this point in time. I'm talking about strictly federal transfers. So it seems like a roundabout way to do things. Would it not be easier to for the provinces at that point in time to say, here's the money that the federal government will need to carry out its responsibilities for national defense, international trade, and so on and so forth. And we will retain our taxes here in province in order to deliver the services that we are expected to deliver anyway, education, healthcare, and so on. Go ahead, Val. I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond real quickly to Josh about the treating provinces like they're grifting comment. I'm not saying that they're grifting. I'm saying that Atlantic Canada, which is what I meant to say earlier, I don't believe that they're grifting in a sense where they're just trying to be all corrupt and shady. What I'm saying is this money is taken and then there's no accountability as to how it's spent. And I'm curious about how it's spent. And if we sit here and we pretend that corruption and grifting doesn't happen by our federal government or by provincial governments on some small measure, then we're just fooling ourselves. I'm not trying to say that they're grifting. I'm saying where's the accountability on how it's spent? If someone is going to give money, you want to know what it's for.
I also want to comment on something Josh said about what I'm required of because the Constitution wrote it, or it's in the Constitution. And like I think this is the biggest problem that people miss about Canada is it in the ideology is that me as an individual, it's a very secular country. That's why Alberta will never be free either, because they're secularists too. I am an individual. I am an end in and of myself. I don't need to dissolve into the collective to find my purpose and my meaning. I am responsible for all my own actions, my own beliefs, and in and of that self, I am the end. But what Joshua was just saying about because it's written in the Constitution, it somehow gives me a duty. No, it doesn't. That's an imposition and infringement of my right as an individual. And that's what the point of all these so kind of programs are, is to kill the individual in you to find meaning in the collective. So the individual is no longer an individual. There's no I. It's just we. Kind of like the Ayn Rand book. I forget what it's called, but in the book, there's no more we. I mean, I. That word was banned from society. It was just we. And that's the problem here. And that's why Canada has all these problems because, we're all in this together or kind of attitude. And that's why they hate America so much too. It's the same attitude. I mean, well, we have it better up here. I hear that all the time from people. Why? Because they think that they find their meaning in this collective identity of not being American. We're in it together. We help each other out here.
So what you're saying is our social conscience is getting in the way.
Well, 100%. Well, people aren't really individuals here when you think about it. I mean, they still are, but they don't think that way. I mean, it's very complicated, but I mean, it's a kind of a Hegelian theory here that is. I didn't do enough research for this. I didn't think it would go this way. I wish I was more prepared, but yeah, they think in terms of me being an individual is somehow a collective at the same time. It's just so messed up.
Well, I mean, a comparison between the Canadian ethos and the American ethos could take a long time, but it should suffice to say that here in Canada, we do believe in peace, order, and good governance. And as it relates to this here topic at hand of our Constitution, Section 36, subsection 2, where it reads, the Parliament and the Government of Canada are committed to the principle of making equalization payments to ensure that provincial governments have sufficient revenues to provide reasonably comparable levels of public services at reasonably comparable levels of taxation. Now, I'd like to ask you, Steve, if we went into the state of Michigan right now, do you think there would be an above average or below average standard of public services in the state of Michigan? But as a greater point, can you not see the merit in trying to establish a base level of public services across the country? Is that not good?
I think you're missing the point here, though. Like, this is a battle for the will. Like, this is a battle for the individual. I mean, I think that's what all the I don't know what you're leaning you are. I would say liberal, I guess. Like, they're misunderstanding, like, the individual has a soul, right? Like, to be a good person, I don't have to subjugate my will for the good of the collective. And that's what all this stuff is for. It's to tamper your will. Hey, you don't need all that good stuff that you want to do in your life. Hey, no, just we want to go this way, and we're the government, and this is what we say. We're going to go this way. And you're supposed to always just subjugate your will for the quote unquote greater good of that a mastermind in government wants to create in everybody. Hopefully that makes more sense.
Go ahead, Val.
Personally, I look at the federal transfers and equalization being managed by the federal government as a complete form of control, and that any province or provinces as a collective would have an extraordinarily difficult time ever making changes to that. So, on the topic of federal transfers, why would the federal government want or allow a province to deal with that when they're the ones who are currently sitting in the power seat, collecting the money and then divvying it out? It would just be incredibly difficult to adjust that situation. Now, provinces currently don't have the ability to easily change that. And that just shows me that there's a certain level of, I'd almost say, tyranny. If a province like ours in Alberta voted against equalization, how come we do not have the ability to impose that for our people here? How come the federal government gets to say, hey, I'm going to reach into your pocket and take it, and I'm going to give it to someone else, and you never get to say anything about it? How come that can be legal? How come we're not looking at that for what it is?
Because you don't know what's good for you, Val. Neither does any other Albertan. If some piece of shit in Ottawa, 2,000 miles away, he knows what's good for us. And for everybody else in the whole country.
I'm not saying every Albertan shares the same standpoint, obviously. There might be, Albertans who believe in equalization. When we did the referendum, there was 40% of people who still wanted it to remain how it was, okay? But there's an inability to effectively change it in any meaningful way, to adjust any formulas, to collect our taxes and remit it to ourselves first before sending what's needed to the federal government. There's no ability for us to ever change that. That just feels like I'm completely under the boot of someone else and I have no power to do anything about it.
I know that, Val. I just answered your question. You don't know power to do anything about it because you don't know what's good for you. Like, that's what the government's telling you, the federal government, that is. Like, that's the answer. That you don't matter. Like, it doesn't matter because you don't know what's good for you. You can cry about it all you want, but we know what's good for you, and we know what's good for the person in Prince Edward Island, and we know what's good for the person on Victoria Island and wherever else. So we get to decide these things. And that's why you have these frustrations.
I want to look at somewhere like the States, right? The United States has, every state is its own little sovereign entity. They don't receive, as far as I know, equalization in the same methods that we do here in Canada. And people are doing just fine. They figured out how to make it work and make their small societies work within their states. But here we are in Canada thinking, oh, well, if we don't send equalization, all of these people will perish and it'll just be, you know, Armageddon for them. No, they'll just either build up where they live and build their economies to suit the level of population and needs that they have, or they'll go where there is opportunity.
No, exactly. They do receive some transfer payments. Like, I think, like, your poor states like West Virginia, they receive federal transfers for food stamps and stuff like that. But it's nothing to the extent that Canada is, for sure.
It seems to me that a criticism of wealth distribution is very short sighted. There are many examples within a capitalistic framework where the rich are compelled to distribute their wealth and their fortune to those less privileged. I think at the core of this, there is some virtue involved. And as we look
Yes.
at the province of Alberta, we are seeing a province that is younger than every other province, is dealing with some $8 billion surplus. They don't have a lot of debt. They have an abundance of natural resources by way of oil. They have very low unemployment. They have very high wages. When we start looking at the formula of have and have not provinces, clearly Alberta is a rich province. The people there are rich. And as a result, our Constitution has a formula to distribute some of their excess wealth to the poor. And those poor people are in the Atlantic provinces of this country.
Hold on, Josh. Josh, this goes back to what I said earlier. They can move. Like, they can go be Albertans. But they want to sit right. And that's the point where you're missing. Like, they can move too and go get one of those high-paying jobs. Like, there's nothing stopping them. Albertans aren't going to discriminate against hiring them. They're choosing not to go.
Well, this again, yes, if they want to move for economic reasons, labor reasons to find more opportunity, okay. But in the country of Canada, we believe that a baseline of public services ought to be established across our country. We have achieved that. America has not. Many places of America are disasters. But here in Canada, we have a system where Alberta, as their inclinations, the province in 2021 voted to remove equalization payments from the Maritimes, even though it
Incorrect, Josh.
result
they voted
in
to remove it from the Constitution.
And the way it's written in the Constitution should suffice. So why they want to meddle with a law here that is just perfectly written and it's working fine, but it's just, again, the devastation that would come over the Atlantic provinces is something of which Albertans simply do not want to acknowledge for some reason.
Well, the one thing this Western Canadian would like to acknowledge is that we have some people that would very much like to engage in a question and answer period. So I do believe we should get to that. But the one thing I do want to do before I do that and invite Val up to be my co-host is quickly play a video from the Alberta Next panel that happened in Red Deer earlier this week, and just get your thoughts on this.
But go ahead. My name's Jeffrey Rath. I'm from Foothills, Alberta. So, Premier, the first thing I wanted to say with the greatest of respect, when you say there's no legal mechanism to stop sending taxes to Ottawa and collecting 100% of the taxes in Alberta, with the greatest respect, you're incorrect. The legal mechanism is Section 1, Sub 3 of the Clarity Act, and that's voting Alberta the hell out of Canada on a clear question. Thank you, Jeff. And then my last point on that is simply on a moving forward basis. I'd like to see a straw poll in this room, and that's one, not do we want to spend another 5 or 10 years bashing our heads against an unamendable constitution versus how many people in this room want a clear vote on independence within the next 12 months. Okay. So thank you. But go ahead.
Okay, so at the end of the evening, of course, in Red Deer for the very first Alberta Next panel that was held, Jeffrey Rath showed up and gave his 2 cents, and that, of course, is the video that
is everybody still there?
So wanted to get your thoughts on that, and then I'm going to bring Val up.
I think every single Alberta Next panel is going to have someone who asks that question. 100%. And people might want to run around doing the propaganda route saying, oh, well, the room was, all plants or all separatists and it was stacked and it was, some conspiracy or whatever. But the fact is that there's a very large number of Albertans who are wanting that question. And so you're always, I think, going to have that question come up and you're always going to hear that applause in the crowd.
I would tend to agree. I was actually at the Red Deer event, so I can tell you quite honestly that the way it went was like this. You had 45 seconds to ask your question. The panel had a minute to give you an answer or make a comment. And what I saw happen, which seemed to be echoed again in Edmonton a couple of days later, was you had a lot of the same people going up to the mic again and again. So um, what I think as time goes on, as the panels go on, we will probably see more people getting brave as these things are discussed, and they'll have more questions to bring to the panel that have perhaps more nuance. So it'll be interesting to see the evolution.
Sure. So, well, here's the evolution. We have two questions, and Mr. Rath here is on record as supporting the Alberta Prosperity Project's referendum question. But there is another referendum question that was submitted before his referendum question. And the referendum question that was submitted before his referendum question, which could very well be the question that Albertans are confronted with, is, do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? And the Alberta Prosperity Project's referendum question is, do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become an independent country and cease to be a province of Canada? So there's a lot to this that needs to be taken into account here, that there are two referendum questions currently being considered.
Well, that is indeed the case, and we'll see what actually winds up getting selected. Val, I'm going to bring you up to co-host so we can start opening this up to the floor.
Steve, did you have a comment on Jeffrey Rath?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a clown. He's oversimplifying the Clarity Act. I mean, the Clarity Act is not designed to make it basically impossible for province to leave. So I don't know. He doesn't. I'm sure we'd get along on most things for sure, right? We probably think the same way on a lot of things, but he's basically, I don't know. He's either dishonest or he's just kind of a simpleton.
I feel like I have to keep repeating this to you, Josh, but those two questions, those two citizen-led initiatives with the question, they're completely different types of citizen-led petitions. One is a policy legislative petition, and the other one is a constitutional one. The one by the APP is a constitutional question that requires a referendum with a question. The other one that asks if Alberta should remain in Canada is a policy/legislation petition, which does not require a referendum and does not require a question. It is supposed to indicate what kind of policies or legislation should be looked at, and it does not include any type of policy or legislation in its application that should be looked at. Now, let's say they're both approved, or the first one, the one we were just talking about, is approved, and it goes forward. Okay, that's nice. And at the end of the day, it gets put on the table in front of the provincial parliament, and they look at it and they say, yep, we've taken that into consideration. That's all they have to do with it. It never has to become a referendum question.
Okay, Val, yes. Well, then you may have to provide a citation here that would support your interpretation. My citation comes from the exact statements from these sources themselves, in that Elections Alberta confirmed that it had received the citizen initiative application and that it had met Section 2, subsection 3 of the Citizen Initiative Act. So under that legislation, An initiative must gather signatures from 10% of the registered voters province-wide for legislative and policy initiatives and 20% of registered voters in 2/3 of the constituencies for constitutional initiatives in a 90-day. Okay. The legislation governing these votes specifically states that 2 referendums on the same general subject cannot be approved. So until we have it from Elections Alberta that this is the question, whether it be the APP or the other one from Thomas Lukaszuk, that we don't know. It's speculation. But I will state that Thomas Lukaszuk's petition had to get 293,976 signatures in order to be considered, and he met that quota, and obviously the APP met a much lower threshold.
The APP petition is a referendum style petition. The other one is not. So that law that you're talking about where 2 can't be at the same time for a referendum petition, they're both not referendum petitions. Only one is.
All right, you're going to have to provide the citation.
I will do so.
In the meantime, Tracy has her hand up. Go ahead, Tracy.
Hi, thank you for the mic, Vanessa. I have to strongly disagree with what Josh was saying about Alberta. You know, I just found these numbers today, and I'd like to share them with you before I move on. Here's in my bookmarks about Alberta. And you may I missed the first part. Maybe you've already come. But here's my receipts there, Josh, with citation. So the Alberta Heritage Trust Fund is now worth 30 billion. The province has a surplus of 8.3 billion, and we have 171 billion barrels of oil in our reserve. So why should that go to any other province when every other province already has their own resources? Why do you want to do what you've always done and get what you've always got when you can do better? This country, every province has resources. Instead of the East and the Atlantic provinces needing a handout, why don't you open up the fisheries for them again? Why aren't you expecting better out of your province? Would you want those sort of numbers being passed out to the rest of the country when there's resources in every country that could be opened up? That the people in Alberta did not work to have that money that could be going towards our roads, our schools, our hospitals, and everything else that helps a province to run and prosper. Why should it be going to other provinces? Why should it be going out east when it doesn't benefit us at all whatsoever? Why isn't every other province saying, yeah, we aren't getting a good deal either? And stand up and say, I stand with Alberta and we want a better deal with as well as Alberta. That's how we get change in this country. There's no reason why all of our resources aren't being extracted and sent to market, and we are living high on the hog like Dubai. I don't accept what you're saying. We don't work here in Alberta to have it sent out to other provinces, and I would think that any other province should feel the same way. So I disagree with you on that one. As far as the Alberta signatures for independence, there are only 177,000 signatures from their goal. And how long has it been? Has it been a month, 2 months? So you can't say that there isn't an interest in Alberta to separate, because we've been doing this for too long and not having a voice. So anyone who says that there's no interest in it is fooling themselves. I'll leave it there, and I thank you.
Well, as it relates to Alberta, I mean, most of what it is you say very well could be agreed upon by all of us. It's just curious to me, Tracy, if equalization was such a problem as you're outlining it to be, why did the province of Alberta sign on to the Constitution in 1981? Equalization had been talked about in Canada since 1867, since 1940, since 1957. and then in 1982. Why is it that every time Alberta has an opportunity to exude some type of diplomatic or strong stance on some of these issues, they prove to be a bit meek and or short-sighted?
Because
Okay, and
Albertans
this
want
time they're
free
not.
healthcare too.
Okay, but this time they're not, and now you guys aren't liking it. Now we are wanting, we are actually taking action, and you guys don't like it. So pick one, but you don't get both. And that was then, this is now. That was a different generation. This is now.
1981 was not all that long
It's a
ago.
different generation. That was my parents.
Okay, Peace Man has had a hand up for a while, and then we'll go to Jake and then 306.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Peace. How's it going?
Good, good. Listen, I just want to maybe offer a different perspective here. I'm a very proud Canadian, and when I was very young, I realized the difference between Canada and the rest of the world. I spent right from my teenage years up until today traveling Canada, meeting people from all over the world, and it is uniquely different than going to other countries. And one thing that I do not hear in the separatism or 51st state propaganda is the fact that Canadians paid to get those resources mined and do and build our country together. And this was the reason why equalization came in, is because we all paid, our families paid long ago to stay together. Even Quebec, uniquely different, but stayed together during a referendum that cost a lot of money. Now imagine if instead, what's happened over the years is the globalists have penetrated 193 different countries. They've thought of every way to cause destabilization in countries and whatnot. The separatism movement really only started to pick up steam after COVID because of uh, let's say advertising and money. And I would like to see the country stick together, and instead of wasting all of this energy, time, money trying to separate our country, by getting to the root causes, which are the problems in our 338. I guess there's more now. Uh, and hold accountability properly, because we don't have opposition in Canada. We haven't for a long time, and it's really a uniparty that's allowing our country to destabilize. I just wish Canadians would stop. One thing that the separatists never say from the West, and remember, I lived in the West. I'm still an employee of SaskTel out there out west. So um, one thing they never mention is how much they get to keep. They always mention what they're giving away, but you just proved in those documents how much they're amassing themselves, anyways. So what is your problem? The Canadians are sticking together. You're trying to help every province be, and it's not being done properly. I agree, but why waste your time trying to divide it instead of trying to fix it?
Hold on here.
And I
Well,
love you,
well,
Canadians.
well. First of all, peace is that we don't. The countries aren't built together. A country is built by individuals pursuing their own interests, whether that is pursuing wealth or whatever lifestyle they want to lead. One guy might not want to be a truck driver, so he opens up a coffee shop and tries to make a go of it that way. And just because one province has amassed all this wealth of individuals pursuing a different lifestyle, who is somebody say, oh, at least we get to keep as much as we get to keep? Like, you got lots, you know, like, that doesn't make any sense that somebody should say.
So you're really only thinking about yourselves and not the country.
No, the greatest redistribution of wealth is capitalism. If you want wealth, make something that people want to buy, provide a service that people want, or go do something for somebody who's going to pay you to do that.
So what are you saying to what I said? Like I said, I want to keep our country together, and why are we wasting time trying to split it up instead of fixing it? What do you say to that?
It's that equalization is not keeping the country together. It's actually taking money away and giving it that could be put to use to be productive and given to people who are just thinking they're thinking they're getting a service out of it, like healthcare or something like that. When in fact, if they just went and got a job and earn more money, well, then they could have more money to invest with or do whatever they want with. And that money that is being taken from the haves, they would get to keep it. And again, it just keeps cycling. And another thing about rich people is
You're
that
not answering the question.
I just answered it. You're not understanding it.
Okay,
The
well, right
question
now, thank you.
is why?
Okay, well, maybe perhaps we can let Steve marinate on that piece, man, and we'll go to Jake, and then 306, and then Roughneck. I do want to kind of give everybody else a chance to get up here and speak as well. So, good evening, Jake. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing all right. So I'm about to become the most unpopular guy in the room. Now, I'm not like, okay, I understand Alberta separatists. I like vaguely, and I understand other separatists vaguely, right? I'm from Ontario. Now, my concern is even though you have a distrust for the federal government and how they do, like if you separate and everything goes hunky-dory, like what about the rest of Canada? And like, don't you see that this could very well result in a repeat of former Yugoslavia and other countries, right? Other examples. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about like, so there's the 51st staters and they want to go out to the States. And it's like, okay, so I hear them bitch and complain about China, about Russia. And it's like, we've never been at war with them, right? But they're so willing to go to the States. And that place flip flops right to left. There is no in between. And as for the equalization payments, it's like people would probably be more on board if there was mass audits to see where this actual money's going. So if we were paying in so that they could better sustain themselves and then eventually get off equalization payments, that would probably, everyone would probably be okay with that. But if it's literally just to employ 25, 30% of the population there to have a government job, then that's something completely different. That's my piece. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. 306, how are you this evening?
Doing pretty well, Vanessa. Everybody else, good, conversation for the most part. Vanessa, I'm going to have to start with you. Have to fact check you on a statement you made. You claimed that Ontario was the recipient of equalization only once. That is incorrect. Ontario has actually received equalization 10 times. So just wanted to set that particular record straight. For Mr. Josh for Canada, and I guess to everybody else, really. I think by and large, I'm going to have to side with, Val in terms of her presentation, but I want to, I guess, maybe provide more direct numbers and more direct facts to combat this idea that, Quebec is a needy province that just can't support itself and, that they need equalization. Quebec is intentionally injuring itself, hampering its ability to produce money so that it continues to qualify. And it does this in two ways. A, it doesn't choose to develop certain resources, mining, etc., that it could be doing. So in that way, it is artificially lowering its fiscal capacity, thus ensuring that it continues to receive equalization to the tune that it does. But it also provides its citizens with the lowest energy prices in the entire country. So if you want to talk about how equalization is supposed to equalize the playing field in terms of providing energy for the entire country, then I fail to understand why Albertans pay on average 25.8 cents per kilowatt hour. British Columbia is down at 13.4, Manitoba 10.3, New Brunswick 14.3, Newfoundland and Labrador 13.8, Nova Scotia 17.1, Ontario 17.8, Prince Edward Island 17.9, Saskatchewan 17.4, Northwest Territories, Humama 41 cents, Nunavut 35.4, Yukon 13.6, and Quebec at the top, the winning, with only 7.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So what they do, and it was discussed by Danielle Smith in the Alberta Next panel in Red Deer, is that they are intentionally subsidizing their Hydro-Quebec in order to provide lower cost energy for their citizens, thus artificially lowering Hydro-Quebec's revenue generation capabilities, thus increasing their need or reliance on equalization. If they were to increase their energy costs by simply 1 cent per kilowatt hour, they would increase their revenues by $1 billion, was the number thrown out at the panel. Let's just assume for the sake of this particular point that they're correct. Josh, you made an entire soliloquy about how, those poor Maritimes, they just can't get by if we don't give them equalization. So then you should be in favor of equalization reform so that Quebec can't continue to self-injure itself, because if we're going to give equalization anyway, then we should be giving it to the places that actually need it. If Quebec were forced to increase its fiscal capacity, more money would be given to those poor, needy maritime provinces, and they could actually do more with actually receiving the money that they quote unquote deserve within this system. So again, we're supposed to be generating a equal playing field when it comes to social services. I would argue that energy, something that everybody has and everybody needs and everybody has to pay for, would be something that should be considered as a part of your social thing. If Quebec, and yet Quebec is 6 cents per kilowatt hour lower than every other province. So just wanting to throw all of that out there.
Well, Josh, he's thrown it your way. What do you have to say?
I'm not sure if he did, Vanessa. He merely provided a recommendation that there would be more resources available for the Maritimes or other have-not provinces like Manitoba in the event that Quebec were to make some reforms to actualize some of their productivity. And I think it's a fair point.
But it's challenging your assertion because earlier in the evening you quoted, I'm going to quote you as stating that equalization was a perfectly written legislation. If it were perfect, then it wouldn't enable Quebec to artificially injure itself so that it could continue to receive money that it fucking shouldn't.
A perfectly written piece of legislation in that 9 out of 10 provinces signed on to the Constitution in 1981. So in that respect, it was perfect enough to be signed off on. But could legislation be improved in the future, as Tracy had mentioned there? Yes, it can. So it is what it is, Shane.
Perfect can't be improved. Perfect is perfect. So maybe be clearer in your language.
Well, perfect would be if we had Quebec sign on to the Constitution, which we haven't achieved yet. But the way that the legislation is written in 36.2, to my mind, as I read it, it's fit for purpose.
Well, thank you for the point, Shane. I do appreciate that. And the fact check. I knew that Ontario had received some equalization. I didn't have an exact number to hand, so I do appreciate that. Roughneck, go ahead. How are you this evening?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for the mic. I want to just make a point to Steve here, especially regarding the I's and the we's. The your equalization payments to me provide a more nefarious problem, and it's just a failure, epic failure, in the sense that it provides your government the capacity to gain political power and keep political power by controlling the public. So when it can do that, it can continue to remove the I's. Once you run out of the I's and you're just left with the we's, eventually you're going to have to find money from other I's. So once you're finished eating yourself, it starts to crumble and fail. That's all I want to say.
100% Roughneck. I couldn't agree more. That was very insightful. Thank you. That's Roughneck. That's why you have people like Little Peepee, who, when a reporter asked him, why should somebody from the West vote for you because he wasn't going to end equalization, his answer was, I'll make Quebec richer. Like, what an insane comment.
Well, if I made one last point, and as I listen to you speaking, it appears you're speaking to an overwhelmingly indoctrinated public that's been indoctrinated into socialism, and they need to be deprogrammed. This is just clearly obvious.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Yeah, they've become a collective.
Well, I do believe part of the modus operandi for undertaking these discussions is to at least bring some enlightenment to the people so we have a better grounding in the topic. Go ahead, Jake. Nice to see you wanting to continue to participate. How are things, and what are your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
All right, so I just wanted to touch off again on the equalization payment, particularly towards Ontario. Um, I believe that Ontario should not receive any because we have such mass potential. It's just untapped. And I understand there's treaty, there's municipal, and there's federal barriers here. So we need to be asking, like, what is stopping all this development? And we need to get right down to that because we definitely need to develop. Canada is vastly untapped, province to province to province. We wouldn't be in this equalization payment conundrum if we actually went at it. I understand for some of those smaller areas, particularly the islands, but it's like that would, if everyone else were to hop off that, it would be drops in the bucket. And as for what Roughneck was saying earlier, socialism runs very deep in Canada. And I don't know, I lost my train of thought. I know I had something up here, but I forgot it all.
Jake, it does run deep in Canada, and that is something we ought to be proud of. Because in the United States of America, there does appear to be various segments of the population who have been left behind for generations. And here in Canada, we have an example here within our own constitution that will say if you are a province within that is basically rich, like Albertans are, they're rich and they don't want to share. But luckily here, Shane and Jake, We have something in
And
our
Quebec is rich,
constitution,
but they don't want to make the money.
but Quebec's a separate issue. I'm talking about Alberta here. They're rich and they want to just keep it all for themselves based on the referendum in 2021. They wanted to make some adjustments to the Constitution over this. But I'm saying here now, the people in the Atlantic provinces, if they did not receive this money, they would be untold devastation. And whether it be Val or Shane or Tracy, it just doesn't seem, you guys just don't really seem to care about the humanity element of this.
Well, because you're assuming that that's what Alberta wanted to do, was just keep it all in Alberta's pocket, when the biggest issue Alberta has is provinces like Quebec using it and not developing their own industries. The biggest province, in my opinion, or biggest issue in this province, in my opinion, is that the people want the equalization payments to go where it's needed most and to be used effectively.
Do you not feel that this is a bit of you're undermining the diplomatic resolve of the people of the Maritimes, that they need you, the Westerners, to sort of coach them on how to allocate resources properly?
Look, if they need our
Not at,
money,
not at
then
all.
then they should
I'm
be
sorry.
able to use that money effectively.
Saskatchewan has an almost identical population total to that of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Saskatchewan was a have-not and therefore net collector of equalization until 2007. Since 2007, thank God, once we kicked the NDP the fuck out of power and the Sask Party took over, Saskatchewan is now a net contributor to equalization. So yes, I think the maritime provinces do need to take a look at Alberta and need to take a look at Saskatchewan and say, how can we do better?
I don't want Alberta to take money out of the pockets of the people who need it. I want Alberta to look at how is this money being used, and for those people who receive it to know that the money is being used in the best possible way to help them the most. I think that the people of those provinces would appreciate that because they don't know where that money is going either.
Hold on here, Val. You're letting people impose their definitions on you. I'm not rich. I know tons of people in Alberta who are rich. And Josh, you don't get to define what rich is. You don't get to say it's whether or not you have this amount of money coming in per year, or if you have this amount of money saved up, or if the province has this amount of money having royalty. You don't define that word. No group of people defines that word. And it's definitely people who don't live anywhere near us define what that word means. And people who want to take it and give it to other people. I mean, are they God? I mean, this is it. This is the struggle. It's the world view. This is Canada's problem, and it's going to be Alberta's problem when they try to convince people to separate. It's this Canadian mentality that they believe that somebody can set the definitions of these relative terms for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, when in the context of federal transfers and equalization payments, we do have a formula, right, Steve? So there's a formula that is used to determine a have and a have-not province.
A formula, Josh? Like, well, did you find the formula under a rock? Is it part of the periodic table? No, it was invented by somebody, right?
Yes, so that's the agreed upon formula that we use to determine have and have not provinces. And I didn't necessarily define rich. I think Albertans do that for themselves. They did so in this video when they talked about $67 billion of their money has went to federal equalization payments since 1957. And they didn't preface that with any sort of message of this has went to the Maritimes to help them out, or to Manitoba or Saskatchewan. They consider this money as like sunk cost when it actually contributes to the overall well-being of Canadians writ large. So I think when you have that amount of excess, and I think compared to the Maritimes probably look at Alberta and say, yeah, you guys are rich. And you're lucky to be rich. You're only rich because of the oil that you have.
Because
Yeah,
the
fair
oil
enough.
just
Oh,
flows up out of the ground by itself and then brings itself to market there, Josh? Do you think you're kind of discounting the hard work that it takes to actually develop those industries and the hardworking men and women that make it happen?
Well, I think you're discounting the hard work that men and women uh, perform out in the Maritimes, in the fisheries that have been undercut by international organizations. That doesn't seem to be a huge threat in Alberta. But again, if you pay attention to what's going on in the Maritimes, it's a crisis.
well, hold on here. Well, they can always move. I mean, that's I've said that a few times already, and it's been Canada ripping off the United States, and when it comes to fisheries, and also it I do agree with you that Alberta should stop the tribalist talk. You're right, and so they need to play a different game. They need to speak a different way, and they need to live by a different system. And that's what I've been saying since we've met, even though we haven't met personally. But that's what I've been saying all along is that Alberta separatists, and even the province itself for that matter now, they need to live by a different system and talk by a different system, or else they're just uh, complaining because they're the haves.
Okay, we're going to go to Peace, Jake, Tracy, and then Roughneck. I do believe that's the order.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from everybody is mismanagement. So when you have mismanagement in your country, you're going to end up with these problems. I want to ask everybody in the room, what have you done? What government citizen tools have you used to question the mismanagement? Because I come onto a lot of these spaces and I listen to everybody, and I want to get that full idea of what everybody's thinking across the country, because I've personally spoke to people across the country, and it's never the citizens that really wanted anything but a peaceful life here in Canada up until just a couple years ago. So um, people can talk all day long, but what government documents, what have you done to try to hold accountability or show the mismanagement before becoming a separatist?
It's a pretty
Well,
open-ended question there, Vanessa. I don't know if you'd have time to go through that per se, but I value on my.
I'll elaborate. I'll, I'll elaborate. Sorry. We have ATIP Act, Access to Information and Privacy. So when the mandates came out, how many people went and asked for the proof of the legality? um, when we were busted up by police officers in Ottawa, how many people laid LECA complaints against the OPP and OPS? How many laid complaints at RCMP? When these things keep coming up, are you using the citizen tools? Because I'll tell you, the whole separation thing, I hear a lot of people really unhappy and wanting to separate because they think they could make a better life in a separate country somehow when the world is encroaching in on Canada. If we used these citizen tools together in unity, like the word I heard so many times chanted in Ottawa, then we could actually fix the root causes to the problems and we wouldn't need to separate.
well, I suppose that one advantage that the Alberta Next panel has, because they are exploring these various ideas, is that the weight a province brings versus an individual means that there can be more pressure applied to have these questions answered. So I suppose there is an advantage in a province taking the lead in that regard, um, just for what it's worth. So I hope that helps. Jake, go ahead.
I'm thinking about what Pete said right there. Kind of derailed me. Um, I live in Ontario. I'm not a separatist by any means, but it's, yeah, I'm a normal guy, normal-ish guy living on Ontario, and trying to come at the system. We'll come at it again, because yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. It's wildly bad mismanagement, and I understand the Alberta separatists, because yeah, you should want a receipt to see where your money's going, and if it's fruitful. If it's just paying for something to not change, Ontario, like I said earlier, is vastly untapped. Why are we collecting payments if we're not doing anything? Toronto's getting bigger and bigger. A lot of people from Ontario want to be completely separate from Toronto. Toronto holds a lot of seats. Alberta holds basically nothing, and it doesn't make any sense. Where do we go from here? How do we actually make this happen while staying whole? That's my question, because I don't see this fragmentation of Canada working out spectacularly. It's just I see it going bad. By the way, I remembered what I was going to say to Roughneck. My dad went to Germany. He was going all over the place. He asked to go to Berlin, was refused. They would refuse to bring him to Berlin. Why? Because they had a short um, occupation there, and ever since then, it's never been the same. Those people are aliens compared to the rest of Germany. And it's been longer than the occupation since, and they still don't want to go in there due to extreme socialism. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jake. And the reason I appreciate your comment and why I enjoy doing spaces like this is that I get the perspective from Canadians across the country, and it's good to see that we're all grappling with the same question, although from different angles. So this is where having discussions like this really is helpful. Tracy, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, Josh, don't take it personally, but I have to disagree with you yet again. And from being somebody from Ontario, you're crying pretty hard about Alberta and their revenue, and it's like you don't want it to stop. You say that the need in the Atlantic provinces is dire, and I agree with you. It is not good over there. But I'm going to ask you then, why in 2019, under the Trudeau government, did he allow Chinese company? He gave them the green light to explore offshore drilling, in the Atlantic waters. And did Newfoundland and Labrador, did the people there say anything to their Liberal MPs and call out and say those jobs should be ours? Why is the Liberal government giving it to the Chinese instead of giving them jobs? This is what I'm talking about when Canadians do not demand better. You guys want to keep going with the way that it always has been. It works just fine for you guys. But you know what? It doesn't work just fine for Albertans. There's no need for it. The money that we make should stay in our province. And you guys should be asking and demanding better out of your province. Because, like I said before, there's no reason for it. And like P said, it's mismanagement. So I don't understand why you keep saying that it's a dire need when they should be calling out to their MPs and saying, open up the fisheries. Every province should be saying it. All of this money, why is Ontario getting equalization payments when I keep being told that you guys are the highest GDP? You're the economic engine of Canada, and you're getting equalization payments, and you're going to tell me that it's just fine the way it is? It's not, and there's no need for it, and it needs to change.
Okay, so yes, Tracy, I understand where you're coming from, and I just want to make sure that yourself and the audience is truly aware of what it is the Atlantic provinces are up against. As mentioned, everyone can take a look at the Fraser Institute's 2025 report on Atlantic Canada's precarious public finances. And they have 4 points, and I'll just be brief here. Why we basically they're saying that the Atlantic province's finances are unsustainable, and there are 4 reasons um, contributing to the rising debt to GDP ratios over time. Number 1, first, due to credit rating concerns about solvency. Atlantic Canada provinces generally pay higher interest rates on newly issued government debt than most other provinces. As a result, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland Labrador are among the 5 highest in terms of current debt charges relative to their own source revenue. Big problem. Financing of debt. Number 2, the second reason the region's public finances are so precarious is the high tax rates in the region. These high tax rates make it much more difficult for the provinces to raise tax rates further in the future to raise revenues to cover debt interest payments. The third source of risk to public finances in the maritime provinces is their high level of dependence on the transfers from federal government. Of all the provinces, PEI, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia are the most reliant on federal transfers to fund their programs. This is a source of vulnerability because these provinces are at greater risk if future federal governments reduce transfer payments to the provinces. And the fourth and final challenge is a demographic one. The Atlantic provinces have demographic features that will put upward pressures on healthcare costs and downward pressure on labor force participation rates. Tracy, these are problems that you guys out west do not have. You have nothing but prosperity ahead of you, and these people have nothing but debt and destitution. This is why it's not a conversation in Ontario, because here in Ontario, we acknowledge the pain and suffering that is going on out in the Atlantic parts of this country, and we're happy to help. And we think Alberta should too.
No, it's only pain and
Okay, if I
suffering
can quickly
because
respond to that, Vanessa.
they want free
Please.
stuff. The answer is less socialism, not more.
Okay, I'm going to let Tracy have a rebuttal, then we're going to go to Peace and 306, and then I think we're going to start shutting it down.
Val has her hand up. Vanessa, did you see Val's hand?
I did see Val's hand, but Val is also co-host.
So I just want to quickly say that, I can only speak for myself as an Albertan. I'm not cold-hearted towards the Atlantic provinces. And you know what? If it meant that they got that contract for offshore drilling of oil off the Atlantic, that Alberta would be more than happy to help them, to fund them, to back them while their credit rating gets built up and they're building up their province. If these equalization payments were helping provinces to build up, but you guys aren't doing that. You just want, it's just a handout and nothing is happening. And there's no need for it. So if they were doing something like you were saying with the credit rating gets better and they're actually doing offshore drilling, their fisheries are open and it builds them back up, we wouldn't have a problem with it. But just to be handing them out just as handouts and like 306 said, with Quebec is getting subsidized for no reason other than to benefit themselves, that's where we have a problem. We're not against this entire country, but when it's just a handout and they're not doing anything and we're doing everything, no, that isn't right. There's no reason for this country to be that way. So that I'll leave it there. Thank you, Vanessa.
Go ahead, Val.
There was a question earlier. As to what provinces were doing, specifically Alberta, in terms of trying to make change and try to fix our federal government as opposed to just becoming separatists. And I just wanted to highlight that Alberta specifically has done a number of legal challenges against the federal government in order to change the policies that are out there. For example, they did a lawsuit against the No More Pipelines Act. They won. Nothing happened. They were part of the legal challenge to the Emergencies Act, which was deemed unconstitutional in certain respects. Nothing happened. The Fair Deal panel in 2019 brought about the referendum on equalization payments, which was a clear majority that said, okay, we need to change the Constitution so we can look at the formula and amend things. Guess what? Nothing happened. Currently, Alberta has 11 active or proposed legal challenges in various areas against the federal government in order to enact change. Alberta has been doing what it's supposed to. It's doing all it can. It's following all the steps within our guidelines to be able to push change, make more profit. Once we make more profit, there's more to go around within Canada, and we're blocked in many respects. And then people wonder why Alberta is like, oh, well, we don't want to be part of the sinking ship anymore because nothing we do matters here. Nothing we say matters. All the change that we're trying to make and make better for ourselves and for Canadians is blocked at every turn. What else are we supposed to do?
Well, I suppose that is the question now, isn't it? Okay, Peaceman, and then 306, and then Mr. Nobody, and we're going to start winding down the space.
Okay. So the first thing is that I asked what you as a citizen were doing, what citizen tools you were using, the accountability measures that are built into every government program. What are people, citizens doing, not corporations and in courts and all of that. Now, for over 20 years, our government has been extremely mismanaged with the same financial advisors and everything. And it was, oh, I think the guy just left. But his speech was very broken. But one thing he said was, this just seems all crazy. No, it has been purposeful destabilization of our country. And my last message tonight is just to think about your countrymen. I don't agree that there shouldn't be any types of payments, but I think it all needs to be reviewed and maybe a referendum held on holding the accountability in our House of Commons, which is affecting all provinces. So peace and use those citizen tools. And the reason why I mention that is because I back up everything I say with those citizen tools. I found the DOJ guilty of breaking laws. I found that the RCMP lied about making arrests in Ottawa, where they hide all the videos from the citizen owned and operated camera right on Wellington by doing ATIP requests and being denied by City of Ottawa and RCMP. And now it's sitting in the House of Commons as a federal review on the DOJ. So that's what I was talking about, not these court cases and corporations that are trying to fight. What about the citizens fighting? Love you all. Have a great night.
Well, thank you very much, Peace, and I appreciate that. And yes, the citizens do have a lot of power in themselves to be able to tackle many different issues and really get to the root of some things. But when it comes to federal transfers and equalization, we're talking more about a constitutional framework. And in that particular sense, this is something that really the provinces only can bring because they were the ones that signed on to the Constitution. So that is one thing that we do have to remember in the context of this particular conversation, but I do appreciate you absolutely. 306 and then Mr. Nobody.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I guess the conversation shifted a teeny bit there, but Peace, to directly respond to your, I guess we'll say, challenge or question there. For me, before I challenge a system, I need to personally investigate and understand that system to see how best to challenge it. And to me, I see the Westminster system as something that is near immune to challenge due to its structures and layers of internal protection that shield it from challenges actually having an impact. So with the greatest respect, while you say that you've got the DOJ to admit this or the RCMP to admit that, and now that paper's in the House of Commons for review and da-da-da-da-da, Well, the prime minister is the person who appoints the head of the RCMP. They also appoint the head of the CSIS. They also appoint all of the Supreme Court judges and a handful of other things. So the entire structure and apparatus that you got to successfully admit something, I mean, congratulations. What is it actually going to change? What's it actually going to accomplish in terms of real world tangible things? And I'm going to respectfully submit either nothing or next to nothing. So the PMO in Canada, or even in the provinces, the premier, to me, holds far too much power within the structures and institutions. I've talked about this at great length in other spaces. I'm going to spare it here. But if the ultimate power has what I perceive to be ultimate power and can effectively ignore, exhaust, or frustrate the individual trying to challenge, then I see no fruit in challenging this system, which relies on too many other people to want to change it. I need not just Saskatchewan want to change it. I need Alberta and BC and Manitoba and Ontario, because the only way that we can get out of Westminster, which to me is the fundamental flaw, the Achilles heel, the thorn in the tiger's paw, it requires a full constitutional convention, which neither Ontario nor Quebec, who benefit greatly from this system, are ever going to agree to. So if from an outside perspective, the system as a whole entity is impossible or so close to impossible that it might as well be considered to be impossible to challenge or change, then fuck that system. And I'm going to instead try and reach out to and convince my neighbors that we're better off leaving said system and creating something different. We already know the system structure and status quo that we have here and now, and we know that it's unlikely to change to our benefit mutually or otherwise anytime soon. And so rather than wasting time, effort, money, and a whole host of other things trying to get Ontario to wake the fuck up and realize, the ills with the 343, I'll just talk to my 1 million Saskatchewanians and say, let's figure out a better way. Let's figure out a way independent of this bullshit.
Well, thank you very much, 306. Yes, this is something that Saskatchewan is also struggling with. We're watching very closely, of course, everything that Alberta is doing. So if nothing else, it's instructive for us as things move along. But thank you very much, 306. Mr. Nobody, good evening. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me last call here. I do apologize. I wanted to be here sooner, but I got some other commitment. I'm going to go with my spiel, but just very quickly, Vanessa, I wanted to ask you a question. Did you actually have your boots on the ground at the last Alberta Next town hall meeting?
Yes, I did. I had my boots on the ground in the facility at the very first Alberta Next panel. I was in Red Deer on Tuesday this week.
Okay, you're at Red Deer. You weren't at the Sherwood Park Edmonton or / Edmonton one, correct?
No, I was not. No, I wasn't going to make that trip. Red Deer was close enough.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. I'm glad that you went. Okay. Anyways, we all want to shut this place, this space down. So, and I just want to say, well, I can't top 306 for what he just said in regards to his passion and his ongoing frustration and disappointment. And I can really sincerely empathize with what he has to say. It's just a quick off. Just quickly here, like you're talking about how hard pressed the Maritimes is. Well, maybe Quebec needs to renegotiate their transmission lines access from Labrador into the United States, because to the best of my knowledge and belief, according to Sue, that they seem to profit more from the electricity that is supplied from Labrador to about 3 states of the Union, and yet Newfoundland and Labrador are the producer. So maybe Quebec needs to step up to the plate and renegotiate a more fair deal where Newfoundland and Labrador can actually yield more revenue for what they supply to the United States. Maybe Quebec needs to step up to the plate and start developing their own resources and not being dependent on others. Okay. Yeah, they don't seem to, at one time they were the number one supplier of asbestos to the world. I mean, there's a place called Asbestos of Quebec, but that didn't turn out well. So maybe they need to diversify and start looking at their own resources. And because it seems to me with Quebec, everything goes one way to them, and they're not willing to reciprocate anything back to Canada. All right. So that's where Alberta is getting a little bit frustrated here. We may be 10 provinces and 3 territories, but unfortunately, the reality is we are still being governed as if this is Upper Canada, Lower Canada, and Rupert's Land. Out here in the West, we don't count, we don't matter, and the only input that Ottawa, in its divine glory, is interested in is money. We supply the money and we overcontribute and underreceive for what we get. We were asking for what is fair, what is just, and what is reasonable. And it doesn't matter how nice and diplomatic or how nasty you are, it's Ottawa's way or no way. Now, some people have woke up to the realization that, unlike others who are still beleaguered by Stockholm Syndrome, that this is an abusive relationship and it's time for a divorce. Now, all Danielle Smith is doing is playing the same game that Quebec did back in the 90s with the separation. When it comes to citizen tools, well, I'm not going to waste my time going in and playing these little red herring games. I went to those Alberta Prosperity Project meetings. I listened to what they had to say. I signed my name on the list. The premier has lowered down the threshold so we can have a referendum. And that gives the autonomy, whether you're for it or against it, to have a vote on this referendum / plebiscite. So that's what I'm going to do as part of my citizen tools, because everything else is a sham. It's a runaround, and and if you can't wrap your head around the fact that you can't get over your Stockholm syndrome, that's your problem, not mine. Anyways, I'm just going to leave it at that because I'm just a little bit angry and frustrated here because there's certain provinces within Confederation, if you want to call it that, are just sick and tired of being ass raped by Ottawa. Thank you there, Vanessa.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Nobody, and I was glad I was able to give you a chance to get up here so you could have your say. So, and thank you for that. All right. So, just by the way, a little bit of clarification. Not only was I at the Alberta Next panel on Tuesday, I also attended the Rebel News event dealing with Alberta separation a few weeks earlier ahead of that. So I'm trying to give both sides here a fair shake and a fair hearing personally, just so I can get a better idea. Anyway, I'd like to get last thoughts from Steve and Josh and Val.
Hi, Vanessa. I think you led a great space. So this was a great conversation, probably the best one in the series so far. And thank you for everyone who contributed. And sorry if you didn't get to talk more. Hopefully next weekend we can fit everybody in.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Steve. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks again for the space, the opportunity to speak about this here subject matter. It was great to see a lot of new faces in the audience. It's been a great series so far, so I'm just hopeful that a lot of people can join in the discussion, that it's accessible. And again, thank you again, Vanessa, for hosting this discussion.
Well, thank you for continuing to be part of my panel. I really do appreciate the varied opinions and viewpoints that each of you bring to this topic. It really is a huge asset. And as far as accessibility, I just want to put this out here for everybody to know. Liberal Discourses is also on Spotify. So if you know people that might be interested in this topic but don't have an X account, you can send them to the Liberal Discourses on Spotify, where we have all the spaces recorded and up there for people to listen to. So All right, Val, what do you think of this evening?
I share your sentiments, Vanessa. It is really nice to hear the opposing opinions. Josh and I are obviously on opposite ends of it, but I am actually appreciative of hearing that Canadian pride is still strong in some people out there, although we may disagree on that. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you putting up with my passion for this particular topic, and I hope that we've enlightened some people and got our thoughts out there and clarified our positions some more. Thank you, Vanessa, for having this space.
Well, and thank you for being my co-host, Val. I appreciate that. Next week, of course, we are tackling the very exciting topic of taxes. Won't that be fun? Anyway, I want to thank absolutely everybody who came up to speak this evening. I appreciate your viewpoints. I always love hearing from you. I love seeing you in the audience, and because it means that we're covering the topic in a meaningful way. And so, I mean, it pushes me to do better. And I'm just delighted that you're here, and so delighted that you come up and speak. So thank you very much. Next week, Sunday, 6 p.m., we are covering Alberta Next Panel, taxes. So make sure you put that in your calendar. Have a great night, everybody. See you next week.